There's something sacred about the way the devotional opens. It doesn't rush. It doesn't preach. It whispers. May His mercy greet you like sunlight touching the edge of your window, and suddenly, the heart softens. For the weary listener who woke up with tension in their chest, who didn't sleep well, who has silently carried the weight of disappointment, this is not just a poetic line. It's a lifeline. It feels like someone reached into their storm, pulled back the curtain, and let light fall gently onto their soul. That light doesn't demand performance. It simply arrives. There's healing in being met with mercy instead of expectation. The tone is not one of correction or pressure, but of presence. This is what makes the content so deeply comforting. It acknowledges the internal fatigue that many people carry, the kind that doesn't always have language, the kind that's felt more than spoken. In a world constantly urging us to do more, fix more, and be more, the soft invitation to pause and breathe in awe becomes radically freeing. There's no checklist to complete here. No spiritual ladder to climb. Just an open door into stillness. The content understands the ache of invisible battles. It speaks into the silence between responsibilities, the in-between spaces where we often feel most alone. And instead of filling that silence with noise, it fills it with nearness. This is why it feels like a warm blanket, because it wraps around the listener without asking them to earn it. It offers the kind of spiritual comfort that doesn't rush in with solutions but sits with you until your soul remembers it's not alone. When the speaker prays, "I did not earn this sunrise," the listener is reminded of grace. Unpaid for, undeserved, yet freely given. That realization is profoundly healing for the one who feels they've failed, fallen behind, or been forgotten. It reminds them that even before they take a single step, they are already held. There's a quiet dignity in that. A holy hush. This devotional doesn't just inspire, it tends to the broken places. It meets the listener in their honest humanity and whispers that God's presence is more faithful than their feelings. It's not loud, but it's deeply felt. It doesn't stir hype, it awakens hope. And that hope is not forced or exaggerated. It's the kind that allows someone to exhale for the first time in days. In that moment, when the noise of the world pauses and the voice of heaven whispers gently through prayer, many will feel the tears rise, not out of sadness, but out of recognition. They will realize, this is what my heart has been waiting for. And that recognition is where healing begins. There is a quiet kind of wonder that lives in the early hours of the morning. Not the kind that demands fireworks or spectacle, but the sacred kind. The kind that hushes you rather than excites you. The devotional's phrasing, "Let the first inhale of the day draw in not just oxygen, but all," is not just poetic, it is transformational. It reframes what waking up really means. Most mornings, people rise with a list already forming in their heads. They're already racing into responsibility. But here, the listener is invited to experience their first breath not as routine, but as revelation. When the line is spoken, "You did not earn this sunrise," something shifts. It is a simple sentence, but it confronts the illusion of control. We didn't command the sun to rise. We didn't secure another day by effort or achievement. We just received it. This gentle reminder births awe. The kind of awe that slows the pace, that unhooks us from anxiety, and anchors us in wonder. Not everything must be solved. Some things are meant to be savored. In that one moment, listeners are drawn into a deeper awareness of the divine. The presence of God becomes tangible not in thunder, but in breath. They begin to realize that every inhale is permission to hope again. Every sunrise is a divine whisper saying, "You are still here. And so am I." That kind of awareness doesn't just inspire. It softens. It sanctifies the ordinary. Suddenly, a cup of coffee, a beam of light, or a breeze through the window is no longer background noise. It becomes a stage where heaven meets earth. This is not about dramatizing the morning, it's about recognizing its holiness. The awe stirred by these lines is not theatrical. It is deeply personal. It takes the common and recasts it as sacred. And for a soul that has grown numb or hurried, this moment can feel like a return to something ancient and eternal. Awe is not loud. It's steady. It expands the spirit without overwhelming it. Listeners begin to realize that gratitude doesn't start with answered prayers. It starts with seeing the miracle of the mundane. The miracle is that they are still breathing. That grace still flows. That mercy met them again at dawn. And that none of it was owed. This realization isn't heavy. It's holy. It doesn't burden. It blesses. It doesn't demand more. It invites deeper. When someone watches this, they may find themselves pausing, hand resting on their chest, feeling the rise and fall of breath, and finally, really noticing it. That pause is awe, and in that pause, wonder becomes worship. That's the beauty of this moment. It teaches the soul to be still long enough to be amazed again. And sometimes, that's all we need to find our way back to God. There is a kind of sorrow that doesn't crush, it softens. It doesn't accuse, it awakens. This is the tone that the devotional carries when it asks quietly, "What do you reach for first in the morning?" It's not a rebuke. It's a mirror. One that reflects back a truth many of us instinctively avoid. We say we want God first, but we often reach for the world. We reach for our phones. We check our notifications, our emails, our calendars, long before we check in with our Creator. The result is subtle, but significant. Without realizing it, we let urgency outrun intimacy. We let information replace revelation. And somehow, the day begins out of rhythm before it even starts. Yet this realization doesn't come with condemnation. That's what makes it powerful. It doesn't shame us. It invites us. The phrase, "We give him our Sundays but not our schedules," hits differently, not because it accuses, but because it's so true, and because deep down, we want to change it. We want our faith to mean more than one morning a week. We want our devotion to show up in the middle of real life, in the emails, the meetings, the parenting, the pressure. This kind of conviction doesn't leave us feeling like failures. It stirs a longing to reprioritize what matters most. It's easy to fall into spiritual autopilot. To love God in theory but neglect Him in the practical rhythms of our lives. And when this devotional gently reveals that misalignment, it's like waking up from a sleep we didn't know we were in. It reminds us that love looks like time. It looks like attention. And it's not that we don't love God. It's that sometimes we forget to start with Him. We forget that the day isn't just something to conquer, it's something to consecrate. That's what makes this moment so holy. It turns regret into redirection. It teaches that conviction, when it's from the Holy Spirit, never ends in despair. It always leads back to grace. Grace that doesn't just forgive what we forgot, it restores what we misplaced. Grace that says, you can begin again. Right now. This breath. This morning. This kind of content meets people where they are, not where they pretend to be. It whispers, there's a better way, without needing to shout what went wrong. And that's why people lean in. Because they're not being told they're bad Christians. They're being reminded that they're deeply loved, even in their inconsistency. That love is what makes them want to change, not to earn approval, but to return home. That's the power of gentle conviction. It breaks the cycle of performance and invites a new beginning, one shaped not by guilt, but by grace. There is a quiet ache carried by many who rise each morning with more weight than rest. Their bodies move forward, but their souls feel stalled. For the one overwhelmed by family burdens, for the one who feels invisible in their own home, for the one questioning if God still listens, this devotional speaks straight to that ache. It doesn't gloss over the pain or offer surface solutions. It enters into the heaviness with compassion and names it without fear. And that's what makes it healing. When someone hears a prayer that says, "You are mine. I choose to begin this day not waiting for affirmation, but declaring identity," it stops them. Especially if they've been chasing affirmation and coming up empty. especially if their identity has been quietly dismantled by disappointment, comparison, or silence. That sentence doesn't just inspire, it rebuilds. It reaches into broken places and gently lays down the bricks of truth again. It tells them they belong, not because they performed, not because they proved themselves, but because they are already chosen, already seen, already loved. For the exhausted soul, the words act like a cup of cold water. For the one doubting their worth, they are a steady voice in a storm of confusion. And for the one who's been showing up day after day while feeling spiritually dry, this moment is a holy pause. It reminds them that they don't need to have it all together to be met by God. They just need to come. There is deep sadness in realizing how far we've drifted. But there's deeper hope in knowing that we can return. This devotional doesn't simply describe God's love, it demonstrates it. It doesn't say, try harder. It says, come as you are. That invitation breaks through the weariness. It makes room for people to admit they're tired without being labeled weak. It gives permission to question without being condemned. And that's the kind of space where real healing begins. The transition from brokenness to hope happens quietly but powerfully. It's in the moment when someone recognizes their reflection in the prayer and thinks, this is for me. That recognition births renewal. It becomes the turning point, not necessarily for the circumstances around them, but for the condition within them. Identity is reclaimed. Not through striving, but through surrender. Not through validation, but through truth. That is the miracle. That sadness doesn't get the final word. That even in the low, quiet places, the Spirit of God speaks. Not with thunder, but with tenderness. Not with demand, but with belonging. And for the one who's felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy, that voice changes everything. It is the voice that calls them beloved and reminds them, even now, that they still belong. There are words that don't just inspire for a moment, they anchor you for a lifetime. When someone hears, let my faith be stronger than my fear. Let my obedience be quicker than my hesitation, they don't just nod in agreement. Something stirs. These aren't motivational quotes made to be forgotten by lunch. They are soul declarations. The kind you write on sticky notes and tape to mirrors. The kind you return to when everything else feels unstable. They are not rooted in hype, but in hope. Not in pressure, but in purpose. The devotional's language doesn't hype up hustle. It calls forth surrender. It doesn't ask you to perform, it calls you to become. That distinction matters. Because for so many, the temptation is to begin each day driven by deadlines, measured by output, chasing a version of success that never truly satisfies. But then comes a shift. Today I don't rise to chase achievement, I rise to follow you. And in that shift, everything changes. The heart exhales. The striving quiets. The soul remembers that calling is more important than climbing. These words ignite something brave inside. They remind the listener that they don't need to manufacture strength, they need to walk in trust. Following God is not passive. It is bold. It is intentional. It is saying yes even when you're unsure, moving forward even when it's messy, choosing worship over worry, and peace over pressure. This kind of inspiration doesn't create adrenaline. It creates alignment. It calls the listener back to their center, their why, their identity, their true source of strength. There's power in choosing to live by declarations rather than by default. This content doesn't simply uplift for a few seconds. It equips. It gives language to faith. It gives clarity to purpose. It dares people to live awake, to stop living in reaction and begin living in response to God. In a world where everyone is rushing to prove their worth, this devotional gently but firmly declares, you don't have to chase your place, you already have it in Him. That's why these phrases become more than words. They become resolved. They are the truths people carry into job interviews, hospital rooms, marriage challenges, and uncertain tomorrows. They're not just inspiration for mornings, they are weapons for the whole day. And that's the beauty of this kind of motivation. It doesn't just push someone forward. It roots them deeper. It doesn't shout. It speaks truth with such clarity and conviction that the soul leans in and says, "This is what I needed to hear. This is how I want to live." And once someone hears that kind of truth that empowers without exhausting, that calls higher without condemning, they don't just walk away encouraged. They walk away changed. Ready to live like it matters. Ready to follow, not fear. Ready to begin the day not with striving, but with surrender and strength. There is a rare kind of peace that does not come from silence alone, but from sacred stillness. It is not simply the absence of sound, but the presence of something holy. The devotional creates that space, not by demanding stillness, but by inviting it. The poetic language, the rhythm of the phrases, and the way scripture is woven seamlessly into prayer, all of it leads the soul into a posture of rest. Not sleep, but soul rest. The kind that causes someone to close their eyes, inhale slowly, and feel safe enough to stop striving, even for a moment. In a culture addicted to speed, this kind of pause feels almost rebellious. But it is the kind of rebellion that heals. The world rushes forward, always asking for more, faster, louder. But here, in this sacred cadence of prayer, the listener is asked for nothing. Instead, they are given room to be, to breathe, to be held. And in that simplicity, something holy is restored. Not productivity, but presence. Not information, but intimacy. The prayers spoken in this devotional do more than communicate, they consecrate. They turn the ordinary into the eternal. Suddenly, the beginning of the day is not a blur of routine but an altar. A place where the soul can meet with its maker in the quiet and feel completely known. The scriptures used are not verses tossed in for effect, they are gentle anchors. Each one grounds the moment, reminding the listener that this peace is not imagined. It is promised. It is real. There's a hush that follows when truth is spoken with tenderness. That hush is what this kind of content creates. It does not shout to be heard. It whispers, and in doing so, teaches the listener how to listen again. Not to the noise of the world, but to the still, small voice of God. The one that says, "You're safe here. You're seen here. You're mine." It is in that atmosphere that hearts are softened, not by pressure, but by presence. Not by instruction, but by invitation. And it is in that moment of sacred calm that the soul begins to remember what matters most. Not the deadlines. Not the opinions. But the nearness of God. The peace that surpasses understanding. The rest that cannot be earned but can always be received. This devotional does not offer escape. It offers recent insight into the kind of life that doesn't begin with chaos, but with consecration. It leads people back to holy ground, even if that ground is their living room floor. And for the one who has felt fragmented by noise, this is where they begin to feel whole again. Not because everything is fixed, but because they are finally still enough to feel held. In a world where so many people scroll through their mornings in silence, surrounded by noise but starved of connection, this devotional creates something rare, a sacred sense of belonging. It does more than speak, it reaches. And in reaching, it reminds the listener they are not alone. They are not the only ones waking up with a heavy heart, not the only ones trying to choose peace over panic, faith over fear. That simple call to comment, "I choose to pray first," is more than a digital prompt. It's a declaration. It's a way of saying, "I'm here, too. I'm in this with you." For many, faith can feel like a solitary journey, especially in seasons of struggle. But when someone sees others publicly claiming a posture of surrender, choosing to pray, choosing to begin with God, it lights a spark of courage. It silences the lie that they're the only ones wrestling, the only ones wondering, the only ones trying. The invitation to share the message, to send it to someone whose mornings are heavy, is more than outreach, it's an act of spiritual friendship. It's a way of saying, you don't have to carry this alone. There is something deeply healing about realizing your voice matters in a shared space of faith. That your comment, your confession, your simple yes, can create ripple effects of encouragement. In that moment, you're not just a viewer. You're a participant. A builder. A voice among many choosing to begin differently. It's subtle, but powerful. The sense that there is a community forming, not around perfection, but around prayer. This devotional doesn't push performance. It celebrates presence. And it doesn't merely comfort the individual, it connects them. Every whispered amen, every moment of quiet agreement, becomes a thread in something much larger. Something invisible but undeniably real. A spiritual fabric is being woven across screens and borders, linking hearts that have never met but believe in the same Savior. That's why people return to these spaces. Not just for instruction, but for interaction. Not just for inspiration, but for intimacy. Because in the midst of personal quiet time, there is also a collective chorus rising. A reminder that while each voice is unique, the longing is shared, to live with intention, to start with surrender, to be seen and to see others. There is a holy kind of fellowship here. One is not built in buildings, but in moments. In shared declarations. In small acts of unity, and for the one who has felt invisible in their faith, this is the gentle welcome back. A quiet hand on the shoulder saying, you belong here. With us. With God. With grace. And that belonging becomes the soil where courage grows. Where the community forms. And where new beginnings take root, not in isolation, but in communion. There is a particular kind of ache that doesn't come from pain, but from feeling lost. When life feels like a maze with no clear direction, when every decision feels overwhelming, and when the heart longs for guidance but only hears noise, that is where this devotional speaks most clearly. The line, "Let your word be my counsel. Let your spirit be my compass," is not a poetic phrase for the spiritually elite, it is a lifeline for the soul that feels adrift. So many people don't need another opinion. They don't need more information or louder voices telling them what to do. They need direction that goes deeper than logic. They need to feel led, not just in big life decisions, but in the small, sacred steps of each day. That's what this prayer offers, not a roadmap, but a guide. Not a set of demands, but a divine presence that whispers, I'm with you. Step here. Breathe here. Trust here. For the one who feels like they've been wandering in circles, this kind of realignment is more than helpful, it's holy. It reminds them that clarity is not the goal. Connection is. That knowing every outcome is not required when you're walking with the one who holds the outcomes. This doesn't remove the uncertainty, but it reframes it. Suddenly, the lack of answers isn't a failure. It becomes an invitation to listen closer, to walk slower, to trust deeper. This devotional gently brings the listener back to center, not by force, but by truth. It reminds them that God is not just watching their journey. He is in it. He is not waiting at the finish line with a grade card. He is beside them in every uncertain step. The pressure to figure everything out fades, and peace takes its place. Peace that says, I don't need to know everything today, I just need to know who I'm following. When someone repeats the words, let your spirit be my compass, they aren't just reciting a line, they are realigning their life. They are loosening their grip on outcomes and strengthening their grip on trust. And in that trust, confusion turns into confidence, not confidence in self, but in a God who never misleads. This clarity is quiet. It doesn't shout. It settles. It brings a stillness to the internal chaos and allows the heart to breathe again. And sometimes, that's the greatest miracle of all, not that the storm stops, but that you're no longer afraid of it. Because you're no longer walking alone. That's the power of this prayer. It does not promise easy answers. But it does promise a steady presence. And for the soul that's been running on empty, that's more than enough. It's not about arriving at the perfect plan. It's about remembering that the perfect guide is already here. She sat motionless in the car, hands still clinging to the steering wheel long after the engine had stopped. Her inbox had just pinged with another email, another rejection. This was the third one this month. A job she had prayed for, prepared for, and waited for. Gone. Again. She could feel her throat tighten, her vision blur. Somewhere between anger and despair, she whispered, "God, are you even listening?" Her morning devotional still echoed faintly in her mind, reminding her to pray first, but right now, prayer felt like a foreign language. The verse from Proverbs, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart," seemed so far away. But then, as she reached to open the door, her phone buzzed again. A message from an old friend, "Just thinking of you this morning. Don't give up. God sees you." Her grip loosened. Her heart softened. And just like that, sorrow made space for surrender. In that brief, quiet moment in the car, she met the tension between disappointment and divine timing.